everyone, and welcome to the Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation continuing podcast series. We're coming to you today thanks to generous support from individuals, donors, and our corporate partners, including Celgene. My name is Tricia, and today we're chatting with Brian Anderson. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, thank you, Tricia, for having me.
I was very eager to talk with you today. I wanted to just walk you through your patient journey, and I'm sure that your insight and your experience will give hope and information and the power to advocate for themselves to all the patients who listen to this episode of the podcast series.
I sincerely hope that is true. Yes, that'd be exciting.
Let's go back in time to before your diagnosis. Were you having any interesting symptoms that would make you think that you had an issue?
Honestly, I was not. I was asymptomatic. I was running. I was enjoying life. And it was only by chance. I was coming up on 50, and I decided that, I need to go and see my primary care doctor and check in and make sure that I'm okay. And he did a routine test, and that's when it started. So I really had no issues. Was not thinking at all that there was a problem in my bone marrow.
So he did a blood test. Is that what caused the alarm bells to go off?
It was a routine CBC, and I got a call a couple days later, and he asked me to come back into the office. I went back, he ran the test again, and then from there suggested that I go see a hematology specialist, part of the same practice, and then she took it from there and did a bone marrow. So it was from that bone marrow that things started, but it still took a long time, and I'd say a couple of years before they actually diagnosed me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's true.
So the test results were not significant enough in one way or another for a diagnosis?
No, it wasn't. So I had mild anemia. My platelets were relatively low. They were in the 90s and 80s, and my white cell count was low, but not extremely at that point. And so I was followed by my oncologist. I changed doctors, changed health plans, and he followed me for a couple of years. He had a couple of running diagnoses. One was copper deficiency. One was just idiopathic. I can't even remember the name of it, but there were several different, just unexplained low platelet counts, unexplained white cell counts, tried different ideas. And then finally, he said he wanted to try some steroids to pump my white cells, sort of stimulate them back into growth mode, if you would. And at that point, I was a little bit hesitant to just try something, especially steroids. So I did a little looking around, and it just so happened that at that point, my sister-in-law worked for Moffitt Cancer Center, invited me to come down and visit with the team down there. And that's when they did a bone marrow biopsy, and they made the diagnosis then. So that was in 2016, when my initial blood work was 2013. So you can see for about 3 years, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know, quite frankly, what it was. And it wasn't causing me significant difficulty. I was running half marathons at the time. So although I say that, I would run and I would get to the point in a run where I just sort of stayed, I couldn't go any faster, and I couldn't understand why I could never break this plateau. And my doctor in Moffitt used to equate it to a car running on empty, that it will run, but at some point it starts to chug and run out of gas, and you have to slow down, and you have to kind of just go coast until you refill or refuel again. And my refueling was I'd coast a little bit on a run, and then I'd gain a little bit of energy, and I could run some more. So I never understood that there was a problem until I went to Moffitt, had the bone marrow biopsy, they said the reason that you're having these symptoms, the reason that you're not able to run like you are, and because your white cells are so low, is because you have this thing called myelodysplastic syndrome, which, of course, I had no idea, never heard of it before.
That's quite a mouthful, myelodysplastic syndromes.
Yes.
Did you get any explanation when they pronounced that word to you as to what it really meant?
I did. I remember my doctor, he brought out a pad and a pencil, and he sat down and started drawing diagrams of bone marrow and of cells and beginning to explain to me the process of cellular division and why some marrow is good, what causes cells to be good and work well, and then what happens in my specific case. And he would draw and say, well, this part's not working, this part's not working, this part's not working, and therefore you're having these low white cell counts and platelets. And so at that point, they made the decision that I was going to be treated because they were concerned about my low neutrophils, and I was hospitalized for 4 days with a ATG treatment at Moffitt Cancer Center. My version of MDS mimics, or at least mirrors, that of the symptoms of aplastic anemia. I have hypocellular bone marrow, so I don't have enough stuff in my bone marrow, and because of that, it looks like an aplastic anemia. And so they decided that, well, why don't we treat it with an aplastic anemia type of treatment, which is an ATG treatment, followed by a course of cyclosporine. And so I was hospitalized for 4 days, received the treatment for 6 months, took cyclosporine on the hope that my counts would recover, but unfortunately that did not happen. So it was worth an effort, but it was for naught in the end.
That must have been frustrating for you to go through that rigorous treatment and not have anything out at the other end.
Yeah, frustration, I think, was a good word, because I think at this point now I've been hospitalized, I've had treatment, I have a name to this thing that I have, and of course you begin to read and look at things on the internet, et cetera, and it starts to get real and scary. And so the fact that the treatment didn't work frustrated myself, my family. We were looking for what's next, but unfortunately, there was not a lot next other than a bone marrow transplant, which was not yet for me because I'm still too. I'm relatively, again, asymptomatic, even though my neutrophils are almost next to nothing. I'm not getting sick. I'm not getting infections. I'm not bleeding because of low platelets. So my doctors determined that because I'm relatively healthy, the risk of going for a transplant was too great. So that frustration continued. I had one treatment, it didn't work. I have another potential curative treatment that could hopefully resolve this. It's not yet there for me. It's just out of my reach. And so I entered this watch and wait period, of which I'm still in, and that frustration continued. So it became it got to the point where I was perhaps a little bit depressed and anxious, and my anxieties were going crazy. And I just decided at that point, I need to do something and change change this that's happening inside me, because I can't change my bone marrow yet. I can't change my blood, but I can change how I'm thinking about this disease. And that point happened about 1.5 years ago. And fortunately, I'm still in that good place where I made that decision to change.
So how did you do that? Did you just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to change? Or did you reach out for some help? Did you involve your family? Did you do it by yourself?
So it was a combination of family. I went to and sought out a therapist that I had known and respected in the past, realizing that this was a little bit more than what I personally can handle on my own. I tried that. It didn't work. But with the support of friends and family, we began to look at this sort of in little stages, right? So what could I immediately control? Well, I could immediately control my nutrition. So I could build a plan around how I can change and better my nutritional habits and the things that would help me, and things that I need to avoid because I'm so severely neutropenic, and understand all that. And then understand what I could do from a mental perspective. And that's where the therapist would come in and say, well, here's some tools, Brian, that you can use to help not get rid of this. I mean, as everyone with any type of disease knows, it doesn't flush out of your mind, but you can begin to address it in perhaps positive ways, such like mindfulness, for instance, is one, and meditation and those type of things. I began to look toward so that I could help calm that anxiety and refocus my brain in a more positive way. And then finally, and this was last year at this time, I knew I needed to take some other additional positive steps, that not just sit back and watch and wait, but be a little bit more proactive. And that's when I decided to help others that are in a similar position, and we set up the local DC support group for MDS, and that has helped me tremendously in being able to just, again, be proactive, be engaging, and looking to others for both helping them, but also looking for support, my own support, from what they can give to me. Oh, absolutely. I know I gain more from the good people in our support group than I'm certainly not an expert. I'm an expert at myself, but when we go and we commune together, I'm learning from them. I'm watching the emotions. I'm
Well,
understanding how they're
that's really
coping and
interesting. You're
how they're
saying that
understanding their disease,
through
and ways
your
that they're
giving of
reaching
yourself
out,
to
and
others,
it
you're
just makes me
actually
grow. And I
having
am
some of
such a
your
different person today from that
emotional or mental
ability for me to
health
reach out and
needs
join with others
met
that
so that
have
you
this
can
disease,
continue on while
and
you're
their
in this
caregivers. And
interim
it's,
period
like I
where
said,
it's
it's
just
helped
watch
me
and wait.
immensely,
Is that what you're
and I
saying?
wouldn't change it for the world. And maybe the first step for me was I didn't immediately jump out to a support group. I know initially I looked out to the AAMDS International Foundation, the MDS Foundation, and others to gain a little bit of information. Then I went on the web and I did a little research, and I joined a couple of forums, and sort of a stair-step approach, until finally I felt comfortable enough to engage others where I felt confident that maybe I had something to contribute. But in the end, that really wasn't the issue. It was more, I didn't recognize how much value I was going to get from just meeting and talking and engaging with others. It was less about me giving and more about me receiving from that experience. So I highly encourage anybody, if there's a group in your area, to do that, and or just reach out on the internet and find others in some type of forum type situation. Yeah.
I hear in your voice the amount of satisfaction that you get from participating in this and how personally rewarding it is for you. So it's apparent to me. I
I think
can't
that
see
last
you.
part
I've never
is
met you,
really
but
where I
it's
am, and
clearly
but
apparent in your
I'm
voice how
embracing
much
that now.
value
If I talked to you
sharing
2 years
with
ago,
other patients
that
like
would have been the
yourself
most frustrating
has been
thing
to
for
you
me.
as
That
you continue
there's
your
so much
journey.
variation, so much
So, do
unknown
you
about
have
this
next
disease
steps in
that
mind? Are you waiting
um,
for a certain
I am
marker
still active and healthy
until
and
you
working, and I
move
want a
towards
solution
another
now, and I
option?
wanted the
Or
transplant now, and I
do your
wanted those things
doctors give
now,
you
and now I
any
can sit back and
idea
say, well,
of
you know what,
how
we
long you're
really
going to
don't
be in
know
watch and wait? Or are
what,
they just saying this is
at least in my
such a rare
case, what the
disease, such an
prognosis looks like.
unpredictable
I
disease?
could,
We can't tell you
I'm still
when there might be a
relatively young for
change that
this
would
disease.
cause
I'm
us to
54.
treat in a
I
different
could
way.
have this intermediate, I could be in this intermediate state for months, years, decades. We really don't know. So because we don't know, I'm comfortable with that at this point. I do know what I'm looking for. I do know the markers from a blood perspective, maybe some additional genetics that or chromosomal changes that may happen. But I'm no longer worried about that. I know when that happens or if that happens, we do have a plan. We have a plan for stem cell transplant. I do. I'm one of the fortunate ones that has 105 matches in the world someplace. Of those 105, I'm sure one of them will, perhaps donate for me. So I'm very comfortable and very unique. And I think I look again at that support group. We're all unique and all different experiences. Mine I know is different from those that you speak with, but I'm comfortable with where my future is now. And so those steps that's one of the steps. But to get there, I'm going to put that aside for now because I know that's something there, and I'm going to continue to work on those things that will help me just in the immediate future. Continue with my work, continue with my family, continue, getting back and be as healthy as I can should that transplant be necessary, and avoid, avoid getting sick, I guess. which, it's with low neutrophil count, it's obviously a concern. What advice? I so I'll start with what I did, which is not to do. I chose not to engage. I chose not to even research. I chose not to think about it. I was an ostrich with my head in the sand, um, and at one point an angry one at that. I think what is
It
positive
sounds
about
great.
this disease is
So,
that there
what
are so many different
advice
variations, so
do
many
you
different treatment
have
options, so many
to
different
people who have just been
ways to approach
diagnosed
this,
with
that
one
if you
of the
just reach
many
out not just to
myelodysplastic
your medical team,
syndromes,
but
diseases?
to someone at AAMDS or MDS Foundation or a mentor, find someone who has this disease and just sit down and spend 5 minutes talking to them or 10 minutes. I've noticed there were several people that contact me, for instance, that it always sort of starts the same. Brian, I was just recently diagnosed, or my husband was just recently diagnosed. I didn't know. I didn't want to call you. I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't know what to do, but somehow I got enough courage to do so. And within a few minutes of just speaking with me or speaking with some of my friends that also have it in our group, at the end of the conversation, they are much more relaxed, more not excited about that's not the right word, but more content and understanding that this isn't as bad as perhaps when you heard in the doctor's office. It's not as stark and difficult perhaps as you've heard. If you talk to someone and just engage. I guess that's the biggest thing. Just go out. Don't live with this on your own. Reach out and there's help and there's folks that would love to just tell you their side and you'll learn something. I guarantee. Well, thank you very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure, and in more ways than one. Thank you.
That is a great note to end on, to reach out, to be there for others, and to ask others to be there for you, to listen and to ask of your peers. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian, for all the insight that you've given us today. And I want to thank all the listeners today as well. Remember that you can find AAMDSIF on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also find us at the website, which is easy. It's aamds.org. You can go to Marrow forums as well. You can find peer counselors through the website on any of the patient information pages. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.